You see it pretty much everywhere, right? In movies, at parties, in stores. But what does alcohol actually do once it gets inside your body? Well, we're about to follow its journey, from that very first sip all the way to its impact on the brain, and everything in between. This is especially important for a body that's still growing. So let's dive in.
It seems like a simple question, doesn't it? But the answer is actually pretty fascinating. The moment someone takes a drink, this really complex journey kicks off. We're going to trace that journey together to see exactly how alcohol moves through your system and what it affects along the way.
So here's our game plan. We're going to start with the basics. What even is alcohol? Then, we'll look at its direct hit on the brain and the rest of the body. After that, we'll break down the science of how all this is measured. And finally, we'll connect all the dots to see why this is so important for your future.
All right, first things first. Before we can really get into all the effects, we need to know what we're talking about. So let's ask the most basic question. What is alcohol anyway?
Okay, so at its core, alcohol is a chemical, and its main job, it's a depressant. Now, that word can be a little confusing. It doesn't mean it makes you feel sad. It means it physically depresses or slows down your central nervous system. So think of it like someone hitting the slow motion button on your brain and body. And while it's legal for adults, there's a very specific reason for that age limit. During your teen years, your body, and especially your brain, is basically a major construction zone. That makes it uniquely vulnerable to the effects of alcohol.
So if alcohol is hitting the slow-mo button, where does it have the biggest impact? Well, let's take a trip to the body's mission control, the brain.
As soon as alcohol hits the bloodstream, one of its first and most important destinations is the brain. This is where the most immediate, most noticeable changes start to happen. Now, alcohol doesn't just flood the whole brain equally. It hits some spots harder than others. It weakens your prefrontal cortex. That's the part that's like your personal CEO, in charge of good decisions. It also messes with your cerebellum, which is like your balance beam expert, making you clumsy. And it hits the hippocampus, which is your brain's memory maker, and that can lead to forgetting things or even blackouts. And here's the kicker. This is so important. Your brain is still developing, still wiring itself all the way up until you're about 25. Introducing alcohol during that critical process can cause way more significant and even lasting damage than it would to a brain that's already finished construction. Okay, so from the brain, the effects start to ripple outwards. It's kind of like a domino effect that travels through the rest of the body. This chart does a great job of showing the difference between what you feel right away versus the damage that can quietly build up over time. On one side, you've got the short-term stuff, like feeling dizzy. Those are the temporary signs. But on the other side, repeated use can lead to some really serious long-term problems, like liver damage or addiction. Let's zoom in on a few key players here. Your liver, it has to go into complete overdrive to filter out alcohol, which it sees as a poison. Over time, that can really wear it out. It can also weaken your heart muscle and raise your blood pressure. And your stomach lining gets directly irritated, which is why people can feel sick or have stomach pain. So, with all these effects, how do we actually measure them scientifically? Well, that brings us to the science of blood alcohol content, or BAC for short. BAC sounds complicated, but it's really just the standard way to measure how much alcohol is floating around in someone's bloodstream. It gives us a precise number that tells us just how impaired a person might be. Let's put some numbers to this. At a BAC of just 0.02, the effects are already starting. You might feel a little more relaxed, maybe a bit loose, but your judgment is already getting a little bit fuzzy. Now, when it climbs to 0.05, things become way more noticeable. Your coordination starts to slip, your reaction time slows way down, and it gets harder to, say, track a moving object. And then we hit 0.08. In the United States, this is the legal line in the sand. At this point, you're considered legally intoxicated because all those key skills, judgment, vision, reaction time, are now seriously impaired. And that 0.08 limit isn't just some random number they pulled out of a hat. No way. It's based on solid science showing that at this level, the skills you absolutely need to drive safely are just too compromised. It makes the road dangerous for the driver and for everyone else. All of this, the science, the brain, the body, it all leads to our final and most important section, protecting your future, and why all of this stuff matters to you, right here, right now. The legal drinking age is 21.
And this law isn't just a rule for the sake of having a rule. It's a safeguard. It's there specifically to protect brains and bodies that are still in that critical construction phase we've been talking about.
And this is exactly why that protection is so necessary. Because the brain is still developing, alcohol's effects are basically amplified in teens. The risks are bigger, a higher chance of accidents, it can mess with school performance, cause memory and learning problems, and it even increases the risk of addiction down the road. It all comes down to making unsafe decisions with consequences that can last a lifetime. When you really boil it all down, all this science leads to one simple truth. Your brain is the most incredible, most powerful tool you will ever have. Knowing how something like alcohol affects it gives you the power to protect it. So the real question isn't just about rules, it's about you. How will you choose to protect that amazing tool?